Back in 2002 I got locked up for some reasons I don't want to get into. I served 25 years in the state prison. I learned many things and realized just how evil people can be. This story happened in my first year. I was cellmates with this crazy guy who got 30 years for trying to kidnap and torture his daughter. His name was Justin. Justin would always talk to himself and tell me that he wished his plan worked. His partner in crime was killed in a gang fight, so he mostly stuck to himself. One night I woke up to him standing over me. I was a scrawny and tall kid, and he was a buff dude. I knew he could kill me if he wanted to, so I stayed on his good side. After a few months we got close, and he told me his plans of killing people, and especially his daughter and ex, once he got out of prison. I just kept my mouth shut. After a few more months, that fateful night would come. I had just gotten back from my time in solitary confinement. I don't want to talk about why. But anyways, I was very tired and went to bed right away. I remember Justin sitting in the corner with his eyes wide open. I thought nothing of it and went to bed. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling like I was suffocating. I opened my eyes, and Justin was on top of me, choking me with a blade to my neck. I tried to scream, but he dug the blade deeper. I knew I was going to die, so I grabbed a screwdriver I always had under my pillow and stabbed him in the eye. He screamed and started pummeling me with punches. I was about to pass out, so I started screaming. He kept punching harder, but I wouldn't stop. Eventually other inmates started waking up, and soon after that, the lights turned on. Justin jumped off the bed and hid his blade. I was so traumatized that I just kept screaming. The guards rushed in and threw me to the ground. I told them where Justin's blade was, and they grabbed it. They tried to cuff him, but he fought back, so they tased him. I was rushed to the emergency room with a broken skull, to black eyes, and major blood loss. Justin was shipped off to another prison and we never saw him again. Rumors were spread that he went crazy and was shipped to a mental hospital. After I got out of jail, I looked him up. Turns out he jumped off the room of the mental hospital. I still have scars on my face and neck from that night, and will never look at prison the same way again.
This happened back in October of 2013. I was 13 at the time. Me and my friends Michael and Henry were going trick or treating. At the time, we didn't know to go for the rich neighborhoods, so we were in a poor area. After about 4 hours, we had accumulated a ton of candy. It was probably 11:30. By this point, we were passing this run-down house with all the lights off when the front door opened and a head peeked out. He called us over, and as naive teenagers we went to him. He told us there was a scary haunted house he was running, and said we were too scared to do it. We didn't want to show our fear, so we happily agreed. We asked for the price and he said it was free. Once we walked in, things seemed sketchy. The house was super dark and we didn't see any scary decorations or actors. He told us the fun was in the basement. As we were walking down the stairs, I noticed a tripwire and told my friends and stepped over it. The guy noticed and said it was just a prop. Once we reached the bottom of the stairs, he shut the basement door. There was a long hallways with doors on each side. We heard screaming from one of the rooms and thought it was part of the haunted house. I was starting to get freaked out. He opened the door and we entered a dark room. Looking back, this was very stupid. Suddenly I felt a firm grip on my shoulder. I thought it was one of my friends, but what I saw horrified me. There were about 6 men armed with bats and knives in the room. Michael freaked out and tried to run. They grabbed him and he screamed as they took him to another room. Then one of the guys, who was bald, told me to shut up and he would let me live. He began tying me and Henry up. Henry was crying and I was barely holding it together. I was thinking about all of the good times I had in my life and how I was not ready to die. The bald guy asked me what my parents' phone number was, and when I told him, one of the other guys wrote it down. He then asked Henry and he said he didn't know. The bald guy asked Henry a few more times before kicking the wall and telling the other men to take Henry away. After they took Henry away, they slammed the door and left me alone in the darkness. After a few minutes, I heard Henry screaming loudly from farther into the basement. I was barely holding it together. Suddenly I heard Tun's footsteps stomping down the stairs and yelling. Then there was gunshots and screaming. It sounded like a war zone. After 15 minutes, the door of my room was kicked down and I was greeted with the sight of SWAT officers. They untied me and brought me outside. My mom was outside waiting for me and she was worried sick. She took me home before I could ask any questions. The next morning, the cops came to my house and told me everything. Apparently me and my friends were victims of human traffickers. They planned on using me for ransom and torturing and murdering Henry and Michael. Luckily, they were saved with minor injuries. There were 7 other kids who were lured into that basement. 9 traffickers were killed in the gunfight I heard, including a bald guy who tied me up. 3 of the traffickers, including the man who lured me into the house, received life in prison. It turns out that Henry had dialed 911 once he heard the scream and called them when they took Michael. I thank Henry for saving my life every day. I will never forget that day and still have a fear of Halloween.
When I was 19 years old, I hated my parents. I would end up regretting this, but at the time, any way I could leave them was good. So when I saw a listing for a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house in the sketchy area of my town, I knew I needed to move in. I brought my dog and moved in the next week. Immediately, I noticed how the house always had a smell to it. It wasn't disgusting, but it left me with a bad look on my face. I lived there with no trouble for the first week, but my 9th day at that house is when it started. I was in my bed with my dog when I heard a noise coming from the kitchen. I went to the kitchen but saw nobody. I was freaked out, but I went back to bed. This happened a few more nights before I got mad and bought a security camera to see what was happening. That night, I woke up in the middle of the night. I checked the kitchen camera and was horrified. There was a man that looked homeless scavenging my pantry. He then grabbed a knife and walked out of frame. I then checked my bedroom camera. The last movement, which was 10 minutes ago, picked up him walking into my room with a knife and entering my bedroom closet. I looked over at the closet and was horrified when I realized it was open a crack. The footage never showed him leaving, so he was still in the room with me. I was too paranoid to move for 20 minutes. Eventually, I acted like I was letting my dog out. Right when I left my room, I heard my closet door opening and I sprinted out the front door. I called 911 and waited at the neighbor's house. 5 minutes later, the cops arrived and found the guy. He was stabbing my dog while laughing. I was so heartbroken, and 2 months later I moved in back with my parents. I pressed charges, but the guy had nothing to his name. I still live with my parents at age 23, and I think I will never be able to buy a new house again.